Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, namo buddhaya, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Salam kebajikan, Om Swastiastu. May peace be upon us all. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and welcome to the second day of G20 Side Event International Conference on Shipping Decarbonization in Indonesia. Let's give a round of applause for our event this morning. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that you are all here to continue our agenda for the second day. And we would like also to welcome all participants who are joining us virtually. Welcome to the second day of this international conference. We would like to also welcome Bapak Basilio Diaz Araujo, Expert Staff for Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment of the Republic of Indonesia. Bapak Muhammad Zaini, Director General of Capture Fisheries, Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries of Indonesia. Mr. Andreas Nordseth, Director General, Danish Maritime Authority. Bapak Nur Hayadi, Director for Maritime Security and Resilience, Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment of the Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, Director, Marine Environment Division, IMO, and of course, His Excellency Lars Bo Larsen, Danish Ambassador to Indonesia, all honorable speakers, moderators, and participants who are joining us in person here in Nusa Dua, Bali, and also those who are joining us virtually. A very good morning and welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, this international conference is organized by Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment of the Republic of Indonesia, International Maritime Organization, Danish Maritime Authority, and Royal Danish Embassy in Indonesia. Yesterday, all of us had the opportunity to join the discussion of some important topics, the international angle of how shipping can become part of the global energy transition, the concrete strategies to advance sustainable and renewable fuels in shipping, as well as the role of government in shipping decarbonization. We also hope that you enjoyed the networking dinner last night, hopefully, and I'm sure all of you are ready to continue with our second day of this international conference. Let us start the agenda for the second day by listening to a presentation about opportunities for shipping decarbonization in Indonesia, followed by Q&A session. Allow me to call and to introduce our speaker for this session, the project lead of Global Opportunities and lead author, presentation of country report on Indonesia by the Getting to Zero Coalition Global Maritime Forum. Join me in welcoming Ms. Katrina Abhold.
Good morning, everyone.
I would like to share a very short background of you. I'm sure you have a lot of things actually with your background, but allow me to shortly introduce Katrina to all of the participants who are joining us in person and those who are joining us virtually. Katrina is a project lead at the Global Maritime Forum based in Copenhagen, Denmark. Her current work largely revolves around shipping decarbonization and supporting an inclusive transition. She works with emerging economies to identify concrete opportunities and initiatives relating to maritime decarbonization. So you have time to deliver your presentation, and then after that, we will continue with Q&A session. Katrina, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. If I can start my presentation. Just wait for it to pop up. here we go. So as was introduced, I'm Katrina Abhold from the Global Maritime Forum. I am representing not just the Global Maritime Forum here, but also the Getting to Zero Coalition. The report that I am sharing the insights of today is a joint project between the Getting to Zero Coalition and the P4G. Some of the project partners, as you can see on the screen, include the University College of London, Environmental Defence Fund, International Association of Ports and Harbours, the World Economic Forum, and GMF. So this is really a collaboration between multiple project partners, and it's the results of 2 years of work, and also some initiative that we had with the Indonesian Ocean Justice Initiative here in Indonesia. So local partners here were extremely useful in getting this information together. So just to start, as we heard yesterday, and as we are hopefully all aware of, shipping's energy transition is coming into greater focus. Shipping accounts for close to 3% of carbon dioxide emissions globally. When you consider this to be, on a country scale, it's the world's 6th largest emitter. And we clearly know that shipping plays a significant role in transitioning and supporting climate goals globally. We've been hearing from the International Maritime Organization, we've been hearing from other companies about the need for transitioning away from fossil fuels into new, more sustainable fuels within shipping. And that's becoming increasingly evident not only within the industry itself through initiatives like the Getting to Zero's Call for Action, as well as initiatives from BIMCO, but you also hear it definitely within the IMO and their attempt and their initiatives for revising their greenhouse gas strategy, which will be taking place at MEPC 80 next year. So we're aware that there's this transition happening, but really where does that put developing countries and where does that put other countries on the agenda? We know that the transition needs to be a just and equitable one, but how do we do that? What does that mean? And from our side, we see the transition as something that can definitely improve and provide opportunities for developing countries so that they can be part of this transition. It's no longer necessary to have reserves of oil and gas within your country to then be part of the fuel market. It's actually going to be changing to those that have renewable energy resources. So e-fuels are being increasingly put on the agenda, not only within international fora, but also in national fora, we are hearing. So on this note, we started our project 2 years ago, specifically looking at 3 countries, Mexico, South Africa, and Indonesia. This was based on some of the work that the World Bank has been looking at regarding the renewable energy potential for each of these countries. So on a map scale, we decided to target different geographic areas, different countries that were all developing, but had potential for renewable energy as deemed by the World Bank. And we were looking in opportunities, how do you harness that energy and potentially push it towards the shipping industry? We came out with 2 key reports. Both have been in English and Indonesian Bahasa. The first report is our energy report, which looks at the renewable energy potential within Indonesia. It also scopes out the needs for shipping. And then the opportunity report, which we recently released, as well as the Bahasa translation, which was released yesterday, I'm excited to say, looks at the strategic business opportunities and scopes out specific areas that can be targeted within Indonesia. So this is where I get a little bit technical, and forgive me for this, but part of our work was explaining a bit how do you understand maritime emissions. Some of the national reporting that we do is based off of the IPCC. These guidelines are not necessarily always the best. It's just one way of doing accounting for maritime emissions. Our partners at the University College of London came out with their own model to do this, to understand a little bit more nuanced how we can look at shipping emissions and some of the particularities around them. So according to Indonesia's national greenhouse gas inventory, Waterborne navigation was responsible for only 108 kilotons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, for a maritime nation, that is exceptionally small. And of course, we wondered, how does that make sense? We looked at some of the data around it, and it's because of the accounting system. A lot of the fuel that's being used for maritime is not necessarily always bunkered at ports, but sometimes can be purchased inland and then taken to ports and refueled with especially the small boat fleet. So it looks like the fuel is being consumed by road transport, but it actually is not. Some of the work that we've been doing for this geospatial model has come out with significantly different numbers for maritime emissions. As you can see, domestic voyages accounted for 7,600 kilotons of carbon dioxide, and fishing accounted for 5 kilotons of carbon dioxide in 2018. Now, when you compare this to the overall carbon emissions for Indonesia, which accounted for in 2018 over 920,000 kilotons of carbon dioxide, that's maybe not so much, but it is still a chunk that can be worked on. Indonesia, I'm not sure if anyone is aware, is ranked 7th in the world for greenhouse gas emissions. When you include forestry and other land use, it bumps up Indonesia's ranking to 5th largest emitter in the world. Now, there's many things that can be done, both on land side and in the energy sector, for how we can look at these emissions and reduce them. And shipping should definitely be included within that conversation. When you look at the difference of this, our calculations showed over 100,000% difference between the national inventory and ours. And it just provides an opportunity to look at maritime emissions in a different scope. This is also not including emissions from transiting vessels. So as you know, Indonesia is located along some of the busiest straits in the world. Indonesia doesn't necessarily always benefit from all of the shipping traffic that goes through its waters. Many ships tend to bunker next to Singapore or in Singapore, and will only drop off and call at ports to unload cargo or to load cargo here. That means that Indonesia doesn't necessarily always benefit from the money received from fueling and bunkering. That tends to go to Singapore, but the emissions are made through Indonesia's waters. That's why when you include all emissions within maritime, the geographic space of Indonesia's exclusive economic zone, it increases maritime emissions significantly up to 40,000 kilotons of carbon dioxide. There we go. So when we're looking at this from the emission side, the energy side, we really wanted to see what are we working with here. Indonesia's renewable energy potential is a little bit tricky to deal with. There's some accounting that has been done, of course, nationally, and there's a lot of studies out there that look at the different potential of Indonesia. We came out with our own system based off of available technologies and realistic capacities in order to increase renewable energy production within the country. Our estimates show that by 2030, Indonesia could produce between 830 to 1,873,000 terawatt hours per year. We have had some stakeholders come back and say that our estimates for solar is actually significantly low, and we argue that it's based off of a conservative calculation. When you consider what this looks like for shipping and shipping's need, if you look at only 5% uptake by 2030, which is the goal that we have as part of the Getting to Zero Coalition, we aim to have 5% of fuel and energy used within the shipping industry by 2030 be from zero emission fuels. And for Indonesia, that only accounts for 8.3 terawatt hours per year. When you look at this in the total renewable energy potential, that accounts for less than 1% of Indonesia's potential energy that shipping would require for 5% uptake. That is very achievable. Here we go. But what we then said is, this is great. We have numbers for maritime emissions. We have numbers for renewable energy. But what does that really mean? What does that look like on the ground? So we looked at potential opportunities that the country has to actually leverage this potential. This was based off of stakeholder interviews and some other work that we've done. And I will briefly cover the 3 opportunities shown here. The first one is the capital move to Kalimantan. There's been discussions about the capital move for, I think, many years now. It's also, we are aware of a contentious issue, as the land that the capital will move on is also it's coal mining land. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to rehabilitate the area. But we do believe that this provides an opportunity for sustainable development. So when you do plan a move for a new capital, it means that you can include green principles within that move. There's also other things within Kalimantan that is happening regards to hydropower and the production of green hydrogen and green ammonia. There's work done in North Kalimantan, including with the municipality, as well as Australian and Chinese investors, to not only build a hydropower station, but as well produce an industrial park that will create value-add products within North Kalimantan, as well as these green fuels. This green industrial park, we don't know where the goods will be shipped from, but if it could be a corridor to the port of Balikpapan, then we believe that there's a lot of benefits that could not only benefit the North Kalimantan and the activities there, but the aggregate demand that could be had from the new capital increases the supply, or could increase the supply of that fuel to serve not only potentially the city itself, but the port. In addition, you can have some development around the port, such as green infrastructure and green services that can be included within the planning. The second one is the electrification of the small boat fleet. I will be covering this in the next slide. But the electrification of the small boat fleet, of course, is quite key. We heard yesterday that Indonesia has a vast small boat fleet. Now, this might not always be accounted for within emissions. They tend to have, most of the information we have for shipping is with large boats, ones that are tagged with AIS and geospatial positioning systems. But the small boats are actually quite significant within Indonesia. Even if you look at only 10% that are motorized, that's still quite a large chunk of emissions that are being done within the country itself. There's also been work already to date on the electrification of small boats. So this technology is available. So we decided to look at that a little bit further. And then lastly, we have the geothermal power decarbonization hub. I am very pleased that yesterday the woman representative from Pertamina Power mentioned already geothermal and the production of green hydrogen within one of their plants. Geothermal, as some of you might be aware of from yesterday, Indonesia has over 40% of the world's geothermal reserves. 40%. The big challenge with geothermal is access. The cost of accessing this energy is massive. It's extremely high, which means that there's a need for Indonesia, if it can access these resources, to do it so cost effectively. But with the access to these geothermal reserves, it could present a significant opportunity for the country, not only to produce energy for its own needs, but to potentially produce a huge chunk of scalable zero-emission fuels for the shipping industry. This would actually place Indonesia on par with becoming an international bunkering hub. Right now, the renewable energy, as it's unclear how much actually Indonesia can produce. You saw in the previous slide it was 100 and over a little bit 800 terawatt hours per year, up to over 1,000. Having a dial-in for that number would actually be quite useful here to understand what's realistic for not only the needs of the domestic needs for